Welcome back to Coach Blake's Breakdowns. We are two-thirds of the way through the NFL season. Let's look at how the team's doing. And honestly, let's take a first pick at my shadow team's big board. We're over 100 players now, so let's get into it. But first, obviously, got to go through how the team's looking so far this year. Again, still looking for a quarterback. Don't need to dwell on that every week, even though I think about it all the time. Bijan Robinson still looking awesome, still holding that 90 plus PFF grade through the season, through 516 snaps. Just a great piece to have. Kenny McIntosh still not getting a lot of run. Still hoping he can find a way in somewhere, but just not looking to be great. But there's some fun running backs in this class that hopefully we'll be able to snag in the upcoming draft. Maybe we can have a dynamic, two-back room that can kind of give Bijan a break every now and then. As far as receivers go, Malik Neighbors, Jackson Smith, and the Jigba still the top of the list. Jalen Coker moving his way up. You can see that I resorted the list a little bit this week. I'm starting to do it just by PFF grade, though that makes it weird for the wide receiver 4 position. As you see, Brendan Rice jump Troy Franklin, though Troy Franklin's got a significantly higher volume of snaps. So obviously we'll have to move that around a little bit and get that working. But I wanted to kind of show off what we're looking at as far as grades and at the positions through 67% of the season. But yeah, Jalen Coker still holding strong, 77.2 PFF grade through 223 snaps, though. Didn't get any run this week. Not sure what that's about. Got to look more into that. However, Troy Franklin is over the 20 mark. Coker obviously isn't after this last week. So that's big news. So technically, Troy Franklin should be the wide receiver 3 with 21.5 snaps per week on average. But overall, just still really feeling good about this wide receiver room. If I could just take Troy Franklin and Jalen Coker and put them together as far as snap volume and PFF grade, we'd have a pretty solid wide receiver 3. But so far, they're still just battling it out. Troy Franklin just needs to look better when he's out there on the field. Tight end room, still not a ton of movement from Dallin Holker. Obviously, Zach Kuntz not getting any run. Holker with 40 snaps. You like to see him with a bit higher of a grade. Don't love the 50 off only 40 snaps, but still has potential. We'll see what happens down the road. As this Saints team is due for a pretty big rebuild, so maybe he becomes a bigger focus in that offense, or can earn a bigger role, I should say, in the coming seasons. But so far, I think this is just what we're going to get out of him this year. Can't complain about Tucker Kraft, 615 snaps and a 61 PFF grade. That is just fine. Can't complain about that ever. He's one of the more steady players on this team, I think, as far as, probably replacement level guys that we should be looking to improve on if we can, especially this year with a fun tight end class as well as running back class, like I mentioned earlier. So definitely not going to avoid that position, but not looking to improve necessarily as a need. And you can see the offensive line. Warren McClendon, second start in a row in week 12. Didn't look great in pass protection against the Eagles, but overall had a solid PFF grade. Looks like a really good run blocker. Kind of fell off after his, big start in week 11 where he posted 70s pretty much across the board as far as PFF grades go. But little drop off against a really good defense in the Eagles. But I'm glad to see that he's pushing for 300 snaps now. He's over 20 as an average per week. So I'm hoping if he can kind of stay in that role and settle in and start performing a little bit better, he can really cement himself. I know some people were talking about him being the Rams' right tackle of the future. And obviously, I'm rooting for that as well. So obviously, hoping he can kind of work out of that in that role. But it's good to see Bo Limmer and Warren McClendon both getting a lot of run, especially down the back end of the season. Hoping to see that continue also in the next season. So, but both of them, 64.1 for Warren McClendon and a 61.6 grade for Bo Limmer. Not awesome grades. Still, not opposed to bringing in any offensive line talent to push for any of these spots. But it's good to see kind of some guys stepping up and looking like they could be serviceable down the road. But as you can see, the rest of the offensive line room, our next highest snap counts, Chandler Zavala, who we've talked about as far as not be getting a lot of wiggle room in that offensive line room to get reps, just with the vets they brought in. So honestly, replaceable guy, 106 snaps, 61.5 grade, not great on either front. That's exactly why I said I'm not, opposed to bringing offensive line talent. I do consider offensive line a need for my team. Definitely looking to bring in some guys. I do still have some hope for some of these other guys on the team that just haven't found the opportunity to get on the field yet. Guys like Luke Whippler, guys like even Javion Cohen, Christian Mahogany for the Lions. That's just a hard room to break into, but I really like what he looked like coming out. So those are 3 guys I'm definitely keeping my eye on, but everyone else I'm really just not opposed to replacing. So Frank Crum I'm still really excited about, just isn't getting a lot of run. And again, a solid Broncos offensive line room. But some good pieces, just not great landing spots post-draft. So that is something we have to battle in the shadow team world. If your guy goes into a crowded room, kind of like JSN did his rookie year with, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. It was really just the wide receiver 3, but he's obviously carved out a really nice role there and can be an emphasis in that offense. So hopefully some of these offensive linemen can break through as well. But we'll see. We'll see. Obviously, we're just going to keep bringing in talent. I've made it a point of emphasis as far as I'm improving the trenches this year. I really like this, draft class as far as offensive and defensive line talent. I do think the offensive line talent's a little, farther down the line. I think there's some really high-end interior offensive line talent, but I don't think there's any great tackle talent in this class. But I think there's some fun guys potentially we could take flyers on later in later rounds when the draft comes around. But we'll talk about that later when we're looking at the big board. Moving over to the defensive side of things. Thule obviously still not performing where I'd like him to. The grades slowly increasing. Oh, one thing I did want to mention as far as my wide receiver room goes, you can see they're both in the same tier as far as PFF grade. Malik Neighbors dropped out of the 80 PFF grade tier, so he's kind of settled in. I still pushing for 80. They're both pushing for 80. I'd love to see them get over that hump by the end of the year. Have kind of these above average players leading my wide receiver room, but not going to complain with just barely sub 80 grades for both. But I just wanted to mention that, he did drop a tier as far as where he's performing this season. Anyway, back to the defense. Thule, 65.3 grade. Not great, not what we're necessarily looking for. But he still is that average level. Obviously, you can see the little chart over here to the right. As far as what the tiers are, in case you're new or have forgotten what we talked about early on in the introduction to Shadow Teams episode. These are the PFF grade ranges for these level of players, and that's what the colors will mean, whether it's in the tier category. This is going to be for last season, how they ended, and then obviously their name and the highlighted color is going to be for where they're at this season. So as you can see, Tuli Tuipulotu and Ivan Pace Jr. both kind of dropped from above average to average players this season. But that's all right in kind of the year 2 where you're still trying to settle into the league. So not too worried yet. Not too worried yet. I expect to bounce back. Really great players, both of them, in my opinion. Anyway, back to it. We have 4 defensive linemen that have now crossed the 100 snap mark on the year. I just felt like that's a pretty fun milestone in a defensive line room that has been very subpar, and that we're looking to bring in a ton of talent in this next class to improve upon. But as you can see, Thule's still around 43 snaps per week. You can see Austin Booker, he's pushing. He's trying to get there. He's at 16.4. We're going to work our way up there. The Adetomowa Adebawore is the only other guy over 10 snaps per week on average. But the frustrating part with this group, and I've talked about it before, and I'll probably continue talking about it because it is just killing me. But looking at some of these PFF grades on the year and wondering why these guys aren't getting more run. I've talked about how I feel like a lot of my defensive tackles are really just role players, and they're more specific, these run stopping nose tackle types. So this year I'm looking for more every down guys that can rush the passer a little bit better, that'll get you on the field more often. That's why a guy like Kenneth Grant really excites me, and I'm hoping I can bring him into this room because he is a guy that can go on every single down and can perform well on every single down in every situation. So I think it'd be a great addition to this room. I'm hoping Austin Booker can kind of pop out and show that he can be a starter in Chicago. And we just really need to roll through and get some of these Vikings out of the room, to be honest, in my opinion, because they're just not getting the run. Like Andre Carter II, I don't really know if they know where to play him. He's kind of a weird tweener as far as, is he an edge? Is he an off-ball linebacker? And Gabe Murphy just hasn't, shown much of anything this year. So I'm not opposed to kind of putting those guys on the P squad and letting them figure it out next season. But yeah, defensive line is, I think, the position of emphasis outside of quarterback in this next draft class. I don't anticipate getting a quarterback too early, so I'm really just going to throw a lot of assets and draft capital at defensive line, potentially some offensive line talent if the guys that I like are available. But defensive line is definitely what we're focusing on. But it is hard because we are getting good grades from the guys that are seeing the field outside of Adetomowa Adebawore, and Austin Booker's not performing great. but he's almost at 200 snaps on the year, so it's hard to. Yeah, I don't know. Defensive line room's quite the situation in year 2 of my team, but definitely not opposed to just throwing a ton of assets at it while I'm still getting 2 picks around and a bunch of free agents. I mean, I guess I'll get the UDFAs every year, but we're getting 14 picks in the draft. There's a lot of defensive line talent. Let's bring some in, improve this room. Moving to linebacker, Peyton Wilson is still pushing more. He's getting more and more snaps every week. It's starting to feel like he's honestly starting to really push that line of, is he going to get 30 per week, or is he going to be a 20 to 25-ish player? I feel like he's consistently breaking that 20 mark. It's just how far into it he can get, because they do view him, I believe, as a more of a situational guy. He's just not a third down guy. He's an early down linebacker. When they go their sub packages on later downs, or even goal line low red zone packages, he's just not in there a lot of the time. And that's what's really holding the snap count back. So hopefully he can find a way to make it in there. If not, then he's going to be a good rotational linebacker for the future. But might have to be looking for another linebacker, because Ivan Pace Jr. had some really weird weeks where he's just not getting a lot of run. He's not seeing a lot of snaps. Like, I think this last game, he only had 5 snaps. Blake Cashman's really holding on to that starting role and really doing his best to not let go of it. So, I mean, if Ivan Pace is getting moved down the depth chart, Peyton Wilson's really just a sub guy. We're going to need to find a starting linebacker for this team. But I've liked what I've seen out of both of them. I'm hoping Peyton Wilson can get to a level where I can give him a tier, because, again, that 72.9 grade, if that holds or improves throughout the rest of the season, would love to just, put him down as a above average player for this group, especially next to Ivan Pace, who should be able to hold at 30 snaps, but just has these weeks where it's just killing that average. So just weird situation with both of them. And then obviously the 2 UDFAs behind them. Haven't seen any run this year. Would be fun to see what Cam Jones could do, but that's a busy linebacker room in Kansas City. Really just trying to decide if I consider linebacker a need or not coming into this next draft class. There are some linebackers that I really like Jack Kaiser out of Notre Dame is one of my favorite players in this class. So I wouldn't hate getting him on this squad. Pushing for some snaps in this room, and maybe having a little bit of a battle in year 3 as far as my team goes. But yeah, this linebacker room is just it's interesting. It's been fun to watch this season and see Peyton Wilson kind of rise up and then start competing for starting level snaps, and then Ivan Pace kind of following his between injuries and just random games where he's just not getting any reps. Just a weird situation there. Moving to this cornerback room, which is honestly probably the second strongest room on this team outside of my wide receiver room. I guess if you want to consider running back, we only have one guy there. But Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are just honestly just kicking butt this year. I mean, Cooper DeJean didn't get snaps until later on in the year, but he's officially over 30 snaps per week on the season, which feels great. I think he's going to, keep his role as a starter on that team. Quinyon Mitchell obviously been great. I don't know why his PFF grade so low. It frustrates me every week to go in and check and just see where it's at in the 70s. It feels like he's playing like an 80-plus player. But I'd love to see them both get over that 80 hump as well and be, it's the level above average. I forgot the name of it. High quality. They're high quality players if they're in the 80s. So that's what we're looking for on this team. Obviously, the 70s are great as an above average player. We're more than happy to have a bunch of those on our team. But if we can get, those 2 receivers and these 2 cornerbacks into that, high quality tier, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Especially if Peyton Wilson can find a way to sneak in there and get some more snaps by the end of the season. We could have a really solid looking team, especially defensive back 7 coming into the season. But Cam Smith, obviously just not playing well. Cam Smith and Antonio Johnson peeking into the safety room are really the guys that have been letdowns in the back end of this defense. Antonio Johnson, obviously a day 3 pick, which, you can only expect so much out of those guys. And I appreciate that he's getting he's 515 snaps. That's a great snap load. That's the same amount as Thule's getting. He's a second rounder. But I just need him to play better. And I'm not sure. I got to get into the film a little bit more and see what's going on with him. I know I've talked about, is it potentially just a good player in a bad situation, or is it just him not playing up to where I thought he would be? So, but yeah, as far as the DBs go overall, Cam Smith kind of a letdown, Antonio Johnson kind of a letdown, Quinyon and Cooper DeJean leading the room. Eli Ricks, Dwight McGlothern, Mekhi Garner, all guys I like coming out, all UDFAs, obviously, just not getting any run. Not really surprising. I do expect Dwight McGlothern to kind of break into the room next year. We'll see how that goes. And then Brandon Joseph, just a guy like I've talked about before, just hard to find snaps, but is finding snaps. Obviously, almost at 200 snaps. I expect him to be over 200 snaps by the end of the season. Playing decent ball, obviously in the 50s, which isn't ideal. Then Jaden Hicks, 78 snaps by a 75.1 PFF grade. He's a guy that I need to see on the field. I want him to get more snaps so bad, but with this Chiefs defense, it's just hard. It's hard to break into the room and hard to steal snaps from some of these other guys. But I do expect him to be a good long-term piece for us. So I'm not looking to replace him necessarily, but the guys above him definitely could use a safety. And this is a strong safety class. I'd really would love to bring in, some D-line, some linebacker, and some safety talent out of this draft class, because I think those are some really strong positions in this class. But without further ado, let's kick it over to the draft board. And obviously, there's some things that have changed. There's the draft board, and we'll talk about what that looks like and what you're looking at here in a little bit. But the updated quality list, you see edge and wide receiver kind of holding strong. I think it's just because of their high value positions. It's never bad to grab a premium edge or premium wide receiver if they're there, no matter how busy the room is. It's never bad to have those extra pieces in there, even though we are trying to build a team, need to fill out other positions. I'm not going to be opposed to bringing in premium positions. Quarterback still at the top, defensive interior still at the top, offensive tackle still at the top. Just with those zeros. And then you see interior offensive line dropped a little bit with Bo Limmer kind of doing his thing. I think he's officially over the 60 mark. He's 61.6. That's right. PFF grade. So he is counted as a quality player now, which dropped the priority of interior offensive line. And then you can see obviously linebacker down here, low value. And we have two guys that are performing well. They're getting their snaps. They're doing what they can. They have solid grades. So that's why it's still down here. But again, not opposed to grabbing it. You can get a little peek over here. Jack Kaiser, 7th on my personal big board, and then 9th on the adjusted big board for my team. So again, not opposed to grabbing that guy at all. But let's slide on over here and look at this board, man. I mean, so what I've done for my shadow team is I put together my own personal big board, just ranking the guys at who I like the best, whose profile looks the best. They got a traditional big board, and then what I do is I bring it into this sheet. And I draft it based on team need. So you'll see these guys. I mean, obviously 1 and 2, we need defensive interior. These guys, I believe, are high-level defensive interior players. They're going to stick at 1 and 2 unless something dramatically changes throughout the rest of the season. They're going to be there. But then you can see Josh Simmons kind of moving up. Maybe we'll slide back over so we can kind of see this and we can reference it back and forth. But you can see he's number 4 on my overall big board right now, but he's gotten the boost up to number 3 overall, just because offensive tackle is a bigger need, and so that priority is going to bump him up on the list a little bit. You can see Azareye'h Thomas is my CB1 as of right now, number 3 on my overall big board. Him and Josh Simmons just switched places. That's a hard sentence to say. Just switched spots on the adjusted big board for my team, just because, again, tackle's a higher need than corner, but he's a highly rated player, so he's still going to end up pretty high on the list. And then I talked about earlier, Kenneth Grant. I know he's only five on my team's big board, but I think he's going to slide a little bit. You can see I have an 8 overall, so we got a three position bump on the big board for my team. I do think he's going to be available for our second pick in the first round, and that's what these green highlighted positions or draft slots, you can consider them, are. They're kind of the range that I'm expecting to pick in based on the randomizer and which picks I'm projected to get. In year 3, my range is like I think 4 to 6, not 4 to 6, but like 4 and then the 6, so 4 to 10 or 3 to 10, whatever. It is what it is. The highest pick I can get is 3, so I'm 3 to 9, and so that's kind of the range I'm in. I kind of did it from the middle, moved it around a little bit. Anyway, this is the range I'm projected to pick in. So I just wanted to highlight those and kind of make sure I'm familiar with the players that are at value in that position. And then kind of if there's anybody available above, we can see that as well. But these are just kind of the players that I'm focusing in on. I want to highlight as we kind of go through this big board real quick right now. Like I said, I just got over 100 players. There's obviously still some players that I'm missing that will probably end up in the top 100. Some of these players are going to move around a little bit as well. It is only the end of November right now, so there's plenty of time left in the draft cycle for us to get this finalized. I wanted to make sure I could get out here and show you guys what kind of the draft room, the war room looks like for my shadow team. But anyway, this is the big board, the range I'm looking to pick at. And we're looking at guys like, I really hope I'm saying that right, Azareye'h Thomas, Kenneth Grant, Tyler Booker, Kyron Lacey, Malachi Starks. Based on, what we just talked about with the team, wouldn't be opposed to bringing in a Kenneth Grant, a Tyler Booker, or a Malachi Starks. Obviously, Thomas would be a fun addition. I do wonder if he's going to go back to school, though, so not going to cross my fingers on that one, but really like the guy. Don't really need a cornerback right now, but like we talked about, not going to be opposed to bringing in just high-level players to make the team better, right? Right now, we only have 11 players that are considered really quality players that are getting the snap count and the PFF grade that we're looking for. So, out of the 53 we're trying to build, 11 is not enough. So we're not opposed to adding any quality players that we feel like are going to improve this team. But do want to look at positions of need. Obviously, as we're team building, we'll talk about team building strategy as we get into the true draft cycle. It's one of my favorite aspects. It's why I love the shadow team. It's one of my favorite parts of the NFL is team building. Anyway, so that's Thomas. Kenneth Grant, Tyler Booker are the guys that I really am considering taking at this pick, even though I feel like that's a little early. A lot of people will probably say that's way too early for either of those players. And I should probably go with the Malachi Starks to improve the back end of my defense in the safety room that's been struggling outside of Jaden Hicks, who's just not finding the field. And I might play my cards and try and be a little sneaky and let Kenneth Grant and Tyler Booker slide a little bit, see if I can get him in that second window and then my first pick in the second round. Because I do feel like Malachi Starks, obviously just outside of the top 5, is my 6th overall player right now. 7th on the big board for my team. I would not be opposed to adding him at all. And like I brought up earlier, Jack Kaiser's another guy, but he's also kind of in that group that I feel like I can let slide. But those are all players that I really love, and I would be willing to take them in the first round. But we'll see how it all shakes out. And then you can kind of look at this as we go down. Notable names: Travis Hunter, 13 on the big board and my adjusted big board at cornerback. Ashton, I did grade him separately, so his name will be in there twice. Once it's all finalized, he'll be in there as a receiver and as a corner. Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State, 9th overall, top 10 guy on my big board. Dropped down to 13 just because of positional value. Can't imagine what a backfield with Bijan Robinson and Ashton Jeanty would look like. That'd be a blast. That'd be really fun to just put together. But I don't know as far as points in the league or really smart team building, but that'd be a fun backfield. I mean, think about like what the Detroit Lions are doing right now with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, but it's 2 much better players in my opinion. So that'd be just really fun to have in our back pocket. And then Andrew McBuka, Quinshawn Judkins, Isaiah Bond is going to be the guy that hits the top of our next pick range, wide receiver out of Texas. 27th overall on my personal big board, 20th overall on the adjusted big board. Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky. Malachi Moore is another guy I'm looking at. And if the board goes how, my opinion says it should go, is probably the guy we're looking at getting in this second window. Based on if like all these guys go, not opposed to grabbing him at all. Malachi Moore and Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M are 2 guys that I would love to add to this team. Malachi Moore, again, being a safety, not necessarily a need, but a position we're definitely willing to upgrade and excited to upgrade if we get the chance to. But Shamar Stewart's going to be one of my favorite players in this class. He probably won't hit that, top 5, top 10 ranking, even though he's going to be considered, my guy. But I really love what he brings to the table. I love his toolbox, love his positional versatility, and just what he can do overall. So would love to have him in this defensive line room. I think it just improves the entire room overall day one. I feel like he's going to be an instant impact guy. Then we get our first tight end. Maybe can, compete with Tucker Kraft, Eli Stowers out of Vandy. Fun tight end to watch. I feel like he's very dynamic, very versatile. He can block well in space. He can run good routes. He can catch the ball well. He's a physical player, high motor player. Can't say enough good things about Eli. Would love to have him on the squad as well. So I'm glad he kind of falls in the back end of that range. I think he's going to fall a little further in the draft, obviously. So he's a guy that we might end up reaching on in the second round in some people's eyes, but I think he's a great player to grab. And then just while he's right here, Walter Nolan's another guy that I've had a hard time getting a read on, but would love to bring him into this defensive line room. Again, another guy that I think is a potential first round, early second round talent that would immediately improve the quality of my defensive line room. So that's kind of what we're looking at. A high level view at the top of my board. You can see it goes to 33. So this is really the guys that, my shadow team's considering first round players right now based on my big board and then adjusting for team need, as I explained. But that's all I have for you guys this week. I appreciate you guys for watching. I should probably always say at the beginning of the videos, but definitely at the end of the videos, make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all the support. Following my shadow team. It's a fun project for me. I know it can get a little monotonous at times, so I'm going to start trying to throw in little draft projects here and there. I've actually been working on my sheet for my salary cap team. That's going to kick in after next season, so I want to make sure I'm ready to go before that time comes, and I can try and run some stuff through it next season. But what I've done is I essentially, put in all the current salaries, whether it's total value, average annual value, and then kind of when their contract year is. We'll probably talk about that here in the next little bit, just so I can show you guys what it looks like and what we're looking at. I do have some guys that are in contract years, usually just because they're on 1 or 2 year deals. They're later round picks or UDFAs. They're able to find homes, but we'll talk about how we're looking at these players and kind of what that sheet's going to look like as this team grows and how we're going to make decisions using that. I've been working on a formula to try and make it more standard. And, this is how we're looking at players. This is what we're going to value. And obviously we can pick and choose who we cut and keep when that time comes. But just kind of getting a good gauge on what we're valuing in these guys and what kind of data we're looking at. But thanks again, guys, for the support. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, this is the first glimpse I've shown of my top 100. You can see my rankings here to the left, and then you can see my shadow team's rankings based on team need and priority. I'll set over here on the right here with the true rank. But yeah, thanks, guys. I'll see you guys again next week.